Welcome to the latest episode of the B Movie Club. This week we'll be discussing the 1983 comedy classic, Trading Places, starring Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Ameche. The list goes on and on. For those of you joining us for the first time, B Movie Club, we're kind of like a book club, only there's no reading. All you have to do is you go on to our page, the original B Movie Club on Facebook, or on our page on YouTube, KD9575, or on Twitter, also at KD9575. We'll tell you what movie we're going to be discussing that week. You can watch it on Netflix and streaming instantly, or from your personal DVD library, Blu-ray library, VHS, Betamax, whatever you got. And send in your questions, comments, favorite quotes, favorite scenes, and we'll talk about it on the show. So there you have it. Trading Places. In this movie, Dan Aykroyd plays Louis Winthorpe III, who is he's a commodities broker. He's high on the hog. He works for this investment firm, Duke and Duke, which is owned by the Duke brothers. Shocking, I know. Randolph and Mortimer Duke, played by Don Ameche and Ralph Bellamy. I always want to say Bill Bellamy. It's not Bill Bellamy. It's Ralph Bellamy. Anyway, so on kind of a lark, after Dan Aykroyd kind of gets into some issue with a local homeless beggar, Billy Ray Valentine, played by Eddie Murphy, they decide to have a little bet, a little wager, if you will, on whether or not it's really environment that determines the type of person you are, or if it's genetics, kind of nature versus nurture. So they're going to put it under their own microscope, see what happens. Their plan is to first get Billy Ray out of the local prison and set him up with nice clothes and a nice home to live in and a nice job, and see if he goes from being kind of the criminal beggar to being kind of a constructive member of society. Conversely, they're going to take Louis Winthorpe and get him framed for theft, for being a drug dealer, have his fiancée dump him, fire him from his job, kick him out of his apartment, and see if he becomes a criminal type. So that's where the Trading Places comes in. They're going to switch spots there. See? It's important. So there you go. They implement this plan little by little. Billy Ray becomes, the hotshot commodities broker, where who knows what his level of education was going into this? Who knows? And Louis Winthorpe, with nowhere to turn, becomes kind of a crazy, drunken, gun-toting psychopath. So there you go. When Billy Ray finds out about this, he tracks down Louis and tells him what their plan was, what the whole story was, and they decide to turn the tables. See, another Trading Places going on here. Basically, they know that the Dukes have this secret plan. They're going to get the crop reports, like, before the rest of the nation will hear it. So they'll find out how the frozen concentrated orange juice crop that year will do. So they'll be able to, basically corner the market. They'll have the information before everyone else will have it, through some unsavory characters, including Clarence Beeks, who for some reason has access to these things. So, as part of their plan, Billy Ray and Louis go and they switch the crop reports so that they have it and give a fake one to the Duke brothers. I almost call them the Duke boys, by the way. That's something else. That's Dukes of Hazzard. Don't mix them up. So, I don't want to give everything away, although I pretty much have. But there's some more places getting traded. So there you go. Came out in 1983. Dan Aykroyd, obviously, was from Saturday Night Live several years before. He was kind of, he'd been in a few movies up to this point. This was by far his most successful. And Eddie Murphy, as you know, had actually, had only been on Saturday Night Live for a couple of years. So he was able to, take this, and this became one of his bigger hits as well. Eddie Murphy, obviously, was pumping out really strong movies right out of the gate. So there you have it. Jamie Lee Curtis Prior to this, she was mostly known for being kind of the scream queen. She was in Halloween, Halloween 2. She was in Prom Night. She was in Terror Train. She was in a lot of kind of, she was in The Fog. A lot of B-movie quality, horror movies. And this was her first movie where it was kind of more mainstream. It was a comedy. Strangely enough, for some bizarre reason, she gets topless in this movie. She plays the prostitute with the heart of gold. What can I say? I guess you gotta get topless when you're a prostitute. It's interesting to me watching these movies how in the 80s all the good comedies were R-rated because they all had nudity. You had like obviously from a few years earlier Animal House and Caddyshack and blah blah blah. Growing up, the only way I got to see these movies was when they came up on TV. So it was like. I mean, I think this was the first time I'd sat through it where it wasn't from some bootleg copy from recorded TV, you know what I'm saying? So, it's shocking how much nudity is in this, not to mention how many times Eddie Murphy's dropping an MF here and an MF there. What can I tell you? Okay? So, be advised. This obviously springboarded Jamie Lee as being kind of a more mainstream actress. She went on to do other things. So, there you go. Ralph Bellamy, Don Ameche were, classic film actors from back in the day. This was the first movie that Don Ameche had been in like 12 years, so there you have it. It's funny, in one scene, Don Ameche has to drop an F-bomb, and due to his devout religious beliefs, he basically told them, I'll do this in one take. One take only, so you better get it right. And he did, and evidently they did, because they got it. So there you go. Of course, Don Ameche, as we all know, went on to be in Cocoon and Cocoon 2. So there you go. This is a springboard for him as well. Ralph Bellamy, not to be confused with his brother Bill, evidently. Or Walt Bellamy. I don't know. He's a basketball player. Anyway, he, throughout the 80s, he was still cropping up. He popped up in Amazon Women on the Moon, all sorts of things like that. I was laughing because, my generation, I look back on those Saturday Night Live alumni like Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy and how they were huge. They were huge. And how, I guess Eddie still makes movies, I hear, although nothing that I'm rushing out to see, you know what I'm saying? So, anyway, interesting. As you know, if you've seen Coming to America, another one of my favorite movies, Ralph Bellamy and Don Ameche pop up again in kind of a cameo, evidently playing the same characters, only now they're homeless, spoiler alert. So what happens? They're trading places. So there you go. Originally, Trading Places was meant to be a vehicle for Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, who, can I just say, it's the most bizarre pairing in history that they pumped out like 4 or 5 movies together. Who put those two together? Anyway, supposed to be them together. Richard Pryor dropped out for one reason or another. Then when they brought in Eddie Murphy to play the role, he didn't want to be seen as kind of doing the same things as Richard. So at that point they got rid of Gene and plugged in Dan Aykroyd. So there you go. Can I just tell you how difficult it is to spell Aykroyd? Try to spell Aykroyd right now. I guarantee you won't do it very well. It's Aykroyd. I don't know why. Why? See, a lot of Y's in his name. I can't explain it. Anyway, what else can I tell you about this movie? Another thing that's kind of interesting is recently, within the last 5 years, they actually had some new regulation that was made into law concerning commodities markets and the stock market. And it deals kind of interestingly on similar things that happen in this movie. For that reason, it's kind of informally referred to as the Eddie Murphy rule. This is true. The Eddie Murphy rule on the stock market. So there you go. You can't do these things that the Dukes try to do. In case you were thinking about it. Okay, change your mind. Other things. This plot is loosely based upon The Marriage of Figaro. It's loosely based upon Hoi Polloi, which was a Three Stooges comedy from way back in the day. Basically, it's those same kind of things where it's like, the poor guy kind of becomes rich and serves up his comeuppance to his wealthy, stodgy old people who are messing with him. The movie was directed by John Landis, who I'm sure you all know. He did a lot of great things, including what he did Caddyshack. He did Animal House. He did, he directed Michael Jackson's Thriller, American Werewolf in London. The list goes on and on. Beverly Hills Cop. So there you go. Premiere Magazine voted this as one of the 50 funniest comedies of all time. So it's got that going for it, which is nice. So there you go. There's a scene on the train where Jamie Lee Curtis is wearing lederhosen, but claims her name is Inga and she's from Sweden. For some reason, she couldn't do an Austrian accent. So that whole thing, there's a lot of ad-libbing going on there. So there you go. What can I tell you? This movie currently holds an 86% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, so you know it's good. I highly recommend it. One of the best comedies of the early 80s, I do say so myself. It wound up being this #2 highest grossing movie of 1983. Only thing beat it out, Return of the Jedi. So maybe if they'd thrown in a couple Ewoks running around, it could have had a chance to be #1. What can I tell you? Anyway, next week. Oh, it's still streaming instantly on Netflix, by the way, so check it out if you have not already. Next week, I'm going to go back to the action genre. I actually haven't done this guy's movies before, so I'm looking forward to it. We're going to do Lone Wolf McQuade, starring staunch conservative and martial arts master Chuck Norris. It is streaming instantly on Netflix, so check it out. Send me your questions, comments, favorite quotes, favorite scenes, and don't forget to spread the word. You need to like me on Facebook, Original B Movie Club. Subscribe on YouTube, KD9575. Also follow me on Twitter, KD9575. As you know, I end every episode with a totally out of context quote, and here it is. Jacuzzi? You ain't jacuzziing nobody. So there it is. Thank you for joining us. Next week, we'll be doing Lone Wolf McQuade. Check it out. Be well.